We are finally doing the podcast, and it's been a long time coming. I've been putting this off for so long, but I finally decided to do it. And you know what? To be honest with you guys, I was very afraid of doing it. I was afraid because I was doing this alone, and I feel very vulnerable when I'm alone. I feel like I don't have somebody to kind of bounce off of energy wise and that sort of thing. So all eyes are on me, and I think that that's a very intimidating thing, but we're here, we're doing it, and that's what matters. This podcast is called Once Upon a Movie, and to give you a little bit of perspective as to what that means, this is a podcast that goes beyond the screen. We are delving into the profound connections between movies and life. It was really important for me to do this podcast. Number one, movies have been a part of my life since as early as I can remember. Now, I was born and raised in Costa Rica in a very small town called Santa Maria de Lota. Now, in the household that I was raised in, I had my grandparents, my mom, and her 4 siblings. And there was not a day where my grandma was not watching TV. Whether it was a novela or a movie, something was always on. Now, by the time I was born, which was in 1986, that should tell you how old I am, there wasn't much content that was coming into Costa Rica. You have to understand that in Costa Rica, things were a lot slower. We were about 2 decades behind. So anything that was brand new in the US, nobody was getting in Costa Rica, and it didn't matter what part of the country you were in. Now, all the programming that would come through on TV in Costa Rica, mind you, there was maybe about 3 channels total that we had, and 3 of those channels, 2 were sports, and 1 was just like a main one that played movies, TV shows, and novelas. Everything that came in was dubbed, so there was nothing in English. I watched the original King Kong dubbed. I watched Land of the Lost, the TV show, that was dubbed. I watched Dinosaurs, the TV show, and that was also dubbed. And a lot of older films, you had all the Universal monster movies coming through. You had, The Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. So it wasn't until 1991 that I remember falling in love with movies. The reason I know that that's the date was because of 2 particular films that were available to me. My neighbors were actually pretty wealthy for the town that we lived in. They had this massive TV, so they probably had like a 42-inch tube TV or something like that. But in my eyes as a little kid, I thought it was the biggest screen ever. They would invite my grandmother over all the time for afternoon coffee, and I would go with her. She'd say, Chinito, come with me. So we would go to the house, and in this house, they had 2 films on VHS. They had Top Gun and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now, as a 5-year-old kid, it was the most amazing thing to watch. I probably watched Top Gun at least 3 or 4 times a week because I'd asked to come over just so that I can watch that movie. And then later, I started watching Terminator 2. And Terminator 2 to this day is actually my favorite movie. It became one that I just could not get out of my mind. There was an element to it that just always stuck with me. Obviously the visuals, the action. But I think the biggest thing that struck with me was the fact that the main character was a kid, and I related to that kid. Even though I wasn't nowhere near his age, I related to John Connor. And so my love for movies really started there. Now, my dad at this point was already out of the picture. I was 5 years old at this point. He wasn't living at home. He had actually moved to the US, but he still maintained contact with me. And one of the things that he would do all the time was that whenever he was watching a movie here in the US, he would be watching it on Cinemax or Showtime, HBO. He would record 1, 2, or 3 different movies all in one single VHS tape, and then he would mail that over to Costa Rica for me so that I could watch it. And included in my care package was a VHS tape with some candy, and that candy was always a bag of Twizzlers. Now, we had this very small RCA TV. I think it was a 13-inch TV. My grandparents had gotten a little bit of a bigger TV, and I was using that little RCA TV. And at this point, my dad was sending me so many movies, so I had a lot of things to watch, and I would watch them all the time. I'd watch them on the weekends with my grandma, or I'd watch them during the week, even during school. It didn't matter. I was always watching movies. And honestly, it was the only kind of connection that I had with my father. He wasn't there in my life, but this was something that I felt connected to with him because I knew that that was him sending me these tapes, and it was a way of me to kind of have my father in my life in some sort of way. Now, this isn't something that I realized at a very early age, mind you. Much later in life, I started to kind of realize why I had such a connection to movies and why I held on, so dearly to these movies was because it was a way for me to just stay connected with my dad, if it makes sense. And so my love for movies just continued to grow at that point. He would send me a lot of Sylvester Stallone movies, probably movies that I should have never watched at a very early age. But here I am, 7 years old, watching Cliffhanger, Cobra, the Rocky movies, First Blood, which I used to play all the time. And he actually bought me 2 official movies. The first one was Speed, which I freaking love to this day. And he bought me Terminator 2. Now, I still have all of my VHS from when I was a kid. And Terminator 2 was the first time that I felt so proud of myself for doing something, because I used to watch that movie so much that the tape actually split in half. I was watching that movie every single day, and it just wore out the tape and it finally split in half. And I remember going, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to watch this movie again. And I just decided to open it up. I grabbed a Scotch tape and I just taped the two back together, hoping that it would work. I put the tape back in, sealed it back up. And to my surprise, it still worked. I felt so proud of myself at this moment. Obviously for people like us, we just didn't have the money to go ahead and replace something like that. And then obviously as the years would progress, I would keep getting more care packages. And there was one very special one to me. And I think probably this one is the most special. Now, I told you guys my favorite movie is Terminator 2, but he had sent me one film and it was Jurassic Park. And I got that with my bag of Twizzlers. And at this time, my mom was also living in the States. She was getting ready for me to move to the US. At the time, I did not know this, but basically my mom had moved out to the US. And at this point, I was being raised by my grandma and my aunt. I remember being so excited, but also really scared. The cover scared me for some reason. I was like, whoa, that's a monster, Like I didn't necessarily understand yet what a dinosaur was. And my grandmother and I, that same night that I got the package, we sat down in my room in my little 13-inch TV and we watched Jurassic Park. And it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. If I could describe that experience, it would be like me now sitting in front of an IMAX screen, a theater all to myself, and just having my grandmother there and just being amazed by what was on screen, just watching, this magic unfold. And the fact that, for those of you who've seen the movie, you understand that at that time there was nothing like it, and to this day there isn't anything like it. The fact that they did practical effects, and Stan Winston created these beautiful dinosaurs, and then obviously Spielberg's directing and just all of it, how it came together, it's an incredible experience, and it's a beautiful film. It still feels real, and it felt very real then for a little kid. I remember the first scene where the man gets attacked by the raptor when they're transferring him into the park. Just the sounds, the gargling sounds, and him like getting eaten. I was just so scared. And I remember my grandma going, it's not real. It's not real. It's okay. And, it was one of those things where like I would watch movies like this. Like I'd put my hands up, but I would kind of open them up a little bit just to see through them. And I'll just never forget that. That was just one of those films that to this day I think about her. And it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful moment in my life. Sorry, my grandmother passed this last year, and it's tough. Anytime I think about the film, anytime I watch it, it always brings me back to that moment in time with my grandmother, and it's a special moment that I will have forever because of that film. And I'm grateful that I have this moment in time to always remember her by. Obviously, I have many other memories, but this is where movies almost played like a parental role in my life. They were there for me in times that I needed somebody or something. They would fill in a void, or they would make me feel some sort of way when I was either sad or something. Whatever was going on, movies were always there to comfort me. They've been a form of therapy my entire life, and I've always been in awe of what people create. So now we fast forward, and now I'm living in the US, and I am seeing movies in a whole different light. I have more access to them than ever. There's stores near me that sell movies like Blockbuster, Hollywood Video. You have Sam Goody. And the fact that I could just walk into a store and, see movies was insane. But here's the biggest part: movie theaters. We did not have a movie theater in my town, and I never went to a movie in Costa Rica as a child. So The first 10 years of my life, I never experienced a theater experience. I was always watching movies on a 13-inch TV. So the time that I got to go to the movies was an incredible time. I cannot tell you what the first movie I saw in theaters was because I don't remember. However, I remember so many experiences in general of just films like Independence Day when it was released, sold out event. Everybody was in this theater. Every single theater was showing Independence Day, and it was sold out to the point that we actually sat down in the aisle to watch it. And back then, they allowed it. They didn't care. People were so excited about this movie. There wasn't anything like this particular film. And I remember I was sitting in the aisle of the theater watching this whole spectacle go down. Incredible time to just be able to experience that sort of thing. From that point on, I mean, my love for films just continued to grow. You know, I was obsessed with it. I was always excited to go to the movies. So my dad at this point was trying to still be in my life and to some capacity. So he would come over whatever weekend he was available, and he would pick me up, and we always had the same routine. He would take me to a McDonald's, and then after McDonald's, we would go to the movies, and I would get to play in the arcade for a little bit. And then after the movies, we would go to a store called Sam Goody. And in Sam Goody, he would let me pick out a CD. And that was my routine. Anytime I saw him, I knew that we were going to McDonald's, to the movies. And I saw a lot of movies with him, again, that I probably shouldn't have been watching, but he also didn't care because he was already sending me, you know, Rambo 2 and 3 by the time I was like 5 years old. So it didn't matter. But again, great experiences that I had watching these movies. And it was my connection to him. You know, at this point in my life, it was the only thing that I had that I could say with my dad. And movies was a thing where he didn't have to talk, I didn't have to talk, but we got to watch these movies together. And I had some great memories. I remember having one really kind of sad memory. He took me to see Liar Liar. You know, if you guys have seen that movie, the kid wishes that his dad can't lie for one day. And I just thought, wow, can that really happen? You know, like this little kid hoping that somehow that's real, and maybe I can wish my dad to, I don't know, be around or whatever the case. It's kind of sad if you think about it. But I remember that movie affecting me a lot, you know, because I was with him at the time. And at that time, you know, he had his own life, you know, he had his own thing going on. And I was just grateful for the time that I did have with him. Now, by the time I was in middle school, I mean, I had a little bit of a collection of films. It was all the stuff that was pretty much left behind by my dad. So I had a lot of VHS, but I didn't have DVD or anything like that. Now, to be honest, I don't remember when DVDs first came out. I do remember when I bought my very first DVD, which was in the year 2000. And that's also when Final Destination came out. That was actually the very first DVD that I ever bought. I remember buying Final Destination DVD before I even had a DVD player. My first DVD player was a PlayStation 2, and that thing worked great up until it didn't. There was some sort of defect on some PS2s where the tan discs, they were like a darker yellow than the clear ones, would not play on a PS2. And there was a point where I had to replace it. So I had certain movies that didn't play and certain movies that did play. And I ended up replacing the PlayStation 2 for an Xbox because I was so pissed off at that point. So I traded it in at a Funko Land and I got an Xbox. And at that point, by the year 2000, I was a freshman in high school and I was collecting DVDs. I was buying whatever movie I had seen in the movies that I really loved. I wouldn't go out to parties. I wouldn't really hang out with friends. I would be watching DVDs. I started consuming everything about the DVD. I'd watch the DVD commentary. If there was 4 different commentaries on the DVD, I watched them all. I watched all the special features. And that really started kind of morphing not just my love for film from a audience perspective, but also from like a filmmaking perspective. I just learned so much about movies, which made the watching experience that much more exciting. I was, you know, looking at things from a technical aspect and being in awe of how they made certain things. Knowing what goes behind making movies made the experience that much greater. And by the time I was legally allowed to work, my very first job was at Sam Goody, and I was basically surrounded by music and movies. And it was just heaven, as a high school kid, making money, going to a place where it didn't feel like work, and I would be able to talk movies with people and that sort of thing. And then unfortunately, Sam Goody closed down and I had to find a new job. And so I got a job at Blockbuster. And if you guys look at my logo, it's the colors of Blockbuster, the yellow and the blue. Blockbuster was a special place for me. I was working, but it never felt like work. I'd have conversations with people about new movies. I'd be able to give people recommendations about films. I made friends with people just chatting about movies. They would always come to me and ask me for a recommend because the last recommendation I gave them, they loved. And they're like, man, you really love movies. Like, oh, I really like the one you told me about this guy. Do you know anything else that's like that? And on top of that, I used to get 5 free rentals a week. So I was watching everything. And I got to watch all the new releases before they came out because we would get them like a week before and we were allowed to check them out and watch them. That way we could talk about the movies. So this was a great thing for me because I'm taking all these movies home and I'm watching them. And, I'm a high school kid. Like, I don't have much else going on. I also took acting classes while I was in high school. I did the theater program. I was in the fall dramas. I was in the spring musicals. It was one of those things where it just was. Feel like it was just a natural next step for me as a fan of film to want to pursue some sort of acting career, if you will. And also I was, in chorus. So, I was doing music and that, and music was always a very important role in my life that was parallel to movies. So as my love for movies was going like this, music was right next to it. And it was just always the two kind of went hand in hand because I would fall in love with movies. I'd fall in love with the score. And, I was always creating. So music was just something that I naturally gravitated to. And I would write music on the piano that felt very cinematic, if you will. That was always my thing. And I just kind of got involved in doing so. That love for movies and music to this day continues to be, what it is. I've been collecting movies since I was a kid with my old VHS and then starting my own actual collection by buying my very first DVD in the year 2000. I actually bought Titanic on VHS too. I forgot I pre-ordered that. I forget when Titanic came out. Was it 99 maybe or 90? I don't remember. No, 97. But I pre-ordered Titanic on VHS. There was a midnight release at the Blockbuster that I later in life worked at. That was a big event to go to at the time. The double VHS, if you guys have seen it, if any of you guys own it, it's pretty cool. It's 2 VHS because the movie was so damn long and needed 2 VHS. And yeah, I've been collecting movies for as long as I can remember. I've been collecting movies essentially my entire life. Now I have over 3,500 movies at the moment. That includes my VHS, my DVDs, my Blu-rays, my 4Ks. And I don't plan on stopping. I still buy movies almost every Tuesday, unless there really isn't anything that I don't want to get. I'm usually buying movies. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I thought maybe I could make something. I had bought a camcorder. It was a Panasonic camcorder. And I just started filming things. And it was really just random things that I would find interesting to shoot. It wasn't like I was trying to shoot stories. I lived in New Jersey at the time. I was about 45 minutes outside of New York City. So, I could commute into New York, no problem. And I remember my first experience filming anything was me going to New York, and I actually left my car in Weehawken and decided to get on rollerblades and go across the George Washington Bridge on rollerblades with my camcorder. And I filmed that. And I filmed me just going over the bridge and then filming, the skyline. And it was close to sundown. And I actually remember there was a police officer who was patrolling. And at the time, there wasn't any fence of any kind on the bridge. Now there is, if I'm not mistaken. But back then there weren't any fence of any kind, so that, unfortunately people would go out there to jump. And I remember I was just like leaning against the rail, just taking it all in. And the cop comes up to me and asks me, he's like, hey, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He's like, you sure? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right, man, if you need to talk to me or anything, I'm here. I'm just in the area. I said, no worries, man. I'm good. I'm just filming. and he saw my camera and he was like, all right, no worries. And yeah, I just remember filming just all these things. And then I went down, I forget the name of the street. I think it was like I-9 or something like that. But it's like right on the other side of the George Washington Bridge. And I was just going down on rollerblades filming all this. And then I went back home and I edited this little series of events of me like traveling there. And I guess what I filmed was like a vlog, if you will, but it wasn't anything special. It was just like a series of sequences with music behind it. And I remember using music from a film called The Divide, which was a very intense film by Xavier Gens, who also directed the movie Frontiers. But the soundtrack to the movie The Divide is beautiful. There's this really beautiful piano piece that's very emotional, and I put that behind it. That was my first time getting a real taste of editing. It kind of did something to me. At that point, I was like, oh, I really love editing. I love telling a story and making somebody feel something. And it almost was like me making a mixtape, because again, you got to remember, my love for music has always been there, and I'm a musician. So I always loved creating music, and I felt that I could create something similar the way that a song can make you feel, but visually. And this idea kind of stuck around with like maybe making my own music videos for like my music, or maybe making music videos for other artists and that sort of thing. And I started messing around with that. I decided I wanted to quit that job that I was at, and I took my pension out and my 401k and I invested in camera equipment. I bought my very first camera. It was a Canon 5D Mark III with a 24-70 lens. I bought a Ronin stabilizer, the original Ronin, the big rig stabilizer. And I put out there that I was a videographer, and I started making content. I started making whatever there was. I shot my very first short film not even a year later. I started making music videos not even a year later. And then I got contracted out to create for this very famous guy. I'm not going to mention names, that I had an opportunity to work for. And so I did. And a year later, I'm traveling the world. I did a tour in Australia, and that's where I met my wife. So a lot of things happened by me quitting my job, taking this risk, and putting it out there that I could create something visually. And none of this would have ever happened had I not had this love, this passion for film. Movies have inspired me to want to create something myself. Movies have inspired me to want to be able to tell a story. Movies have inspired my music. My music that I make always has a thematic element, if you will. There is always something that is inspiring from film that you'll find in my music. I remember with the movie The Watchmen, there's a line that Rorschach said in the movie trailer where he says, I'm going to paraphrase, but the world will look up to us and shout, save us. And I'll whisper, no. And I was like, holy crap, that is so dark. That's so deep. And I wrote a song about that called The World Ends With You. That was that was the title of the song. And the lyrics literally in the chorus were, and I'll say no when it comes to saving the world, nothing left for us to live for, because you take it all from me. And it was based off of Rorschach's line from The Watchmen. I created another song called Killer Instinct, which was based off of the music from the Killer Instinct video game. So film, gaming, all that stuff has influenced my music in some sort of way. And, this passion has led me to live the life that I have now, where I produce content for different people from, different industries. I've had the chance and opportunity to go all over the world and do all amazing things that I never in my life thought I would be doing. Some kid from Costa Rica in a small little town in the middle of the rainforest basically would have never thought any of this would be possible. And here I am today because of that, getting to do what I love, and my love for movies continues to be there. I still enjoy every aspect of filmmaking, and somehow I've managed to avoid being like almost too critical of film. Like I get a chance to still enjoy it from an audience perspective. I don't go into movies ever watching it from a technical aspect, unless it's like really bad. Like if there's something that I see that's really bad that just stands out to me, it's like, like I have a problem, for example, with like fast edits, like fast cuts in fight scenes, because I'm like, that's such a lazy way of telling a story. That's such a lazy way of showing that you basically don't have any choreography, or that your actor wasn't able to perform the things he was supposed to perform. When it's just like, think of like Steven Seagal, like slapping hands like crazy and just like cutting to like 17 different camera angles just for like 5 or 6 punches. Stuff like that drives me nuts. And that's the only time where like something will take me out and I'm like, or when I see like fight scenes where guys are like standing around doing this while he's fighting the other guy. And then like when he turns around, like you see him, like little things like that. That's just like stuff that will stand out to me. But for the most part, I sit down just still being that same kid in Costa Rica watching magic unfold on the screen. And that's where my, love for film is today. Yeah, this podcast, I'm hoping that we can continue having these conversations with different people from all parts of the world. I've already recorded episodes. I believe I have about 10 episodes, and I have 10 different stories being told by, different people sharing how they came to find love in cinema and what it's done for them. And my hope is that you guys appreciate and like this approach to talking about movies from a different perspective. Sometimes we'll get into some of the technical stuff. I still love to have conversations, debates about movies and that sort of thing. But the central message of this podcast is just sharing that love for cinema, talking about those connections between movies and life, and just people being able to express themselves and give a better understanding of what they love about movies. And I'm just super grateful that I'm at a time now where, apps like TikTok exist and YouTube where, we have a space to talk about this sort of thing. Because growing up, I had one friend that I was able to talk movies with all the time. And I still have that friend. I'm grateful that I still have him in my life where he and I can talk about movies at any given moment. If something comes up, we can go ahead and have a conversation. But it's hard. It's hard to find people that are very like-minded in that space. And, TikTok is a place that has allowed me to, meet people that are just like me and have these conversations. So the guests that you'll see in the upcoming episodes are all people that I've met on TikTok who have been generous enough to sit down with me and have a conversation about film and their love for film. So I hope you guys appreciate it as much as I do. And of course, if there's anything that you guys want me to talk about, please go ahead and comment below. I'd love to get more ideas as to what to do with this podcast as well. And I do apologize in advance because you're going to see these other episodes. We didn't have this set up prior to those episodes. We were still kind of figuring out what worked and what didn't work. So I had a different mic, I had a different camera. The lighting was a little different. So it's going to look a little different. And then about 10 episodes in, it's going to look like this again. And it's going to sound like this. So please bear with me. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like it. Consider subscribing to the channel. That definitely helps and it inspires me to keep going for sure. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.